6 months pregnant and alone in New York City, Elena Ward thought she'd finally escaped her past. But fate has a cruel sense of timing. On a rain-soaked evening, trapped in a crosswalk as black SUVs halt traffic, she comes face to face with the one man she'd sworn never to see again, Victor Leone, the Mafia boss she divorced to save herself. When the wind tears open her coat, revealing her swollen belly, time stops. His eyes darken with recognition, possession, and something far more dangerous: claim. The truth she'd hidden is now bleeding into the open, and there's nowhere left to run. Before we begin Elena's impossible story of love, betrayal, and the twins that will change everything, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's dive in. The rain came down in sheets that October evening, turning the streets of Manhattan into rivers of reflected neon and desperation. Elena Ward stood at the crosswalk on Fifth Avenue, her hand pressed protectively over her stomach, feeling the double kicks that had become her only comfort in the last 6 months. The city roared around her, horns blaring, taxis splashing through puddles, tourists shrieking as they ran for cover. She should have taken the subway, should have stayed home, should have done 1,000 things differently. But the apartment had felt too small tonight, the walls closing in with memories she couldn't escape no matter how far she'd run. So she'd grabbed her coat, now soaked through and clinging to her frame, and walked. Just walked, trying to outpace the ghosts. The crossing signal blinked its permission. Elena stepped off the curb with the crowd, her sneakers splashing through the gathering puddle at the gutter. Halfway across, the world changed. A convoy of black SUVs rolled up to the intersection, sleek and predatory, their tinted windows reflecting nothing but the city's frantic lights. They didn't stop at the light, they commanded it. Traffic halted. Horns died mid-blare. Even the rain seemed to pause, hovering in the air like held breath. Elena's feet stopped moving. She knew those vehicles, knew the precision of their formation, the way they owned every space they entered. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs, each beat a warning she was 6 months too late to heed. Number. Not here. Not now. But the universe had never cared about her timing. The rear door of the center SUV opened, and Victor Leone stepped out into the rain. 6 feet 2 inches of controlled violence wrapped in a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on Roman coins. All sharp angles and aristocratic brutality. Eyes the color of winter storms, capable of freezing a man's courage with a single glance. He'd aged in 6 months. Or maybe she was just seeing him clearly for the first time without the haze of desperate love clouding her vision. New lines bracketed his mouth, cut deep around his eyes. He looked harder, more dangerous. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who ruled the underworld of New York City with an iron fist and tolerated no defiance. Their eyes met across 20 feet of wet asphalt. Elena saw the exact moment recognition hit him. Saw his entire body go still in that predatory way she remembered too well, the calm before the strike. His gaze raked over her, cataloging every change, the shorter hair, the cheaper clothes, the exhaustion carved into her features. Then the wind gusted, tearing her coat open. Victor's eyes dropped to her stomach. Time fractured. Elena watched his face transform, confusion flickering across those austere features, followed by something raw and terrifying. His lips parted. His hands, always so controlled, clenched into fists at his sides. She'd seen Victor Leone angry before. She'd seen him cold, calculating, merciless. But she'd never seen him shocked into absolute stillness, like a man who'd just taken a bullet and hadn't yet realized he was bleeding. Elena. Her name carried across the intersection, cutting through the rain and traffic like a blade. She ran. Not toward the opposite curb, that route was blocked by the SUVs and the growing crowd of confused pedestrians. She spun and ran back the way she'd come, her heart in her throat, her hands cradling her belly as if she could protect her babies from the truth that had just detonated between them. Behind her, she heard Victor's voice, sharp with command. "Don't let her leave this block." Elena's sneakers slapped against wet concrete as she sprinted down Fifth Avenue, weaving between startled pedestrians. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The twins kicked frantically, responding to her panic. 6 months pregnant, and she was running like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. She ducked into a Duane Reade, her eyes wild as she scanned for another exit. A security guard looked up from his phone, frowning at her dripping, frantic appearance. Elena didn't give him time to question. She rushed past the cosmetics section, past the confused shoppers, and burst through the back door into a service corridor. The alley behind the building was narrow and dark, stinking of garbage and rain. Elena ran anyway, her coat flying behind her, her mind racing faster than her feet. She'd been so careful. 6 months of living like a ghost, no credit cards, no phone under her real name, no contact with anyone from her old life. She'd taken cleaning jobs that paid cash, rented a room in Brooklyn from a landlord who didn't ask questions, and moved through the city like a shadow. All of it, all that careful isolation, destroyed in one gust of wind. Elena emerged onto a side street and immediately descended into the subway, taking the steps 2 at a time despite her bulk. A train was pulling into the station, the 6 heading downtown. She squeezed through the closing doors, gasping, and collapsed into a seat as the train lurched into motion. Through the window, she saw Victor's men emerge onto the platform, their phones already pressed to their ears. But the train was moving, carrying her away into the underground darkness. Elena pressed her forehead against the grimy window, her whole body shaking. The twins were doing gymnastics now. Disturbed by her fear, she smoothed a hand over her stomach, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "It's okay. We're okay. I won't let him." But even as she said it, she knew the truth. Victor Leone never lost what he considered his, and she'd just shown him something he would consider his in the most fundamental, primal way possible. The apartment in Brooklyn was supposed to be her sanctuary, a 4th-floor walk-up in Sunset Park, rented under the name Maria Gonzalez, in a building where half the residents didn't speak English and the other half didn't care to know their neighbors. The landlord, Mr. Chen, had barely glanced at her fake ID before pocketing 3 months' rent in cash. It wasn't much. A studio with a kitchenette, a bathroom the size of a closet, and a window that looked out onto a fire escape and the brick wall of the neighboring building. But it was hers, safe, invisible, or it had been. Elena climbed the stairs slowly, her legs trembling with exhaustion. The building smelled like cooking spices and old carpet. Someone's television blared a game show in Spanish. Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B had left a bag of hand-me-down baby clothes outside Elena's door. Again, bless her. Elena's hands shook as she unlocked the 3 deadbolts she'd installed herself. Inside, the apartment was dark and cold. She'd kept the heat low to save money, and now she shivered as she peeled off her soaked coat. Her reflection in the small mirror by the door showed a stranger, hair plastered to her skull, mascara running in dark streams down her pale cheeks, eyes too large in a face that had lost its softness. She looked haunted. She looked like exactly what she was, a woman who'd made a terrible mistake 6 months ago and was about to pay for it. Elena turned on a single lamp and sank onto the futon that served as her couch, chair, and bed. Her hands found her stomach automatically, that protective gesture that had become instinct. "Your father knows about you now," she whispered to the twins. Everything just got so much more complicated. The babies shifted in response, and Elena felt tears burning behind her eyes. She'd left Victor Leone 6 months and 2 weeks ago, in the middle of the night, with nothing but a hastily packed bag and divorce papers she'd had delivered the next day. She'd known he would be furious, known he would look for her, known that leaving the most powerful crime lord in New York City would mark her as either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. What she hadn't known was that she was already 3 weeks pregnant. By the time she'd realized, she'd been in hiding for a month, working under the table at a bakery in Queens. The pregnancy test had shown positive. At the same moment, her employer had handed her an envelope of cash and told her to take the weekend off. Elena had sat on the bathroom floor of a McDonald's and stared at those 2 pink lines until they blurred. She should have gotten rid of it. That would have been the smart choice, the safe choice. Victor had made his position on children crystal clear during their marriage. Not now, not yet, maybe never. His world was too dangerous, he'd said, too unstable. He couldn't guarantee their safety. Translation, He couldn't control a child the way he controlled everything else in his life. But Elena had looked at those pink lines and thought of all the ways her marriage had been a beautiful prison. Thought of how Victor had loved her with the same intensity he applied to everything, absolutely, possessively, suffocatingly. How he'd made decisions for her, isolated her from friends, tracked her every movement in the name of protection. How she'd been drowning slowly, losing herself piece by piece until she'd woken up one morning and couldn't remember who she'd been before Victor Leone had decided she belonged to him. So she'd kept the baby. Later, when the ultrasound at the free clinic revealed twins, she'd cried, not from fear, but from something that felt almost like hope. These children would be hers, only hers. She would raise them in freedom, in choice, in all the things her marriage had lacked. It had been a beautiful fantasy. It had lasted exactly 6 months. Elena stood and moved to the window, pulling back the thin curtain to stare out at the dark street below. Rain still fell, turning the sidewalks into mirrors. A few people hurried past, heads down, umbrellas useless against the wind. No black SUVs. Not yet. But they would come. She knew Victor well enough to know that much. He wouldn't let this go. Couldn't. It went against every instinct he possessed. The question was, how long did she have? Her phone, a prepaid burner she'd bought at a bodega, sat on the small table beside the futon. Elena stared at it, her mind racing through impossible scenarios. She could run again. Pack what little she owned and disappear into another city, another name, another life. But she was 6 months pregnant with twins. Running had limits now, physical limits, financial limits, and deeper than that, a truth she'd been avoiding for months. She was tired of running. The knock came at 11:47 p.m. Not loud, not aggressive. Just 3 measured raps against the door, patient and inevitable. Elena's blood turned to ice. She stood frozen in the center of her tiny studio, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Maybe if she didn't move, didn't breathe, whoever it was would go away. 3 more knocks, same rhythm, same patience. Elena. Victor's voice carried through the cheap door, soft and controlled. I know you're in there. I can hear you breathing. Her legs almost gave out. How? How had he found her so fast? She'd been so careful, so methodical. Different name, cash only, no trail to follow. But this was Victor Leone, the man who'd built an empire on knowing everything about everyone. The man who had sources in every borough, every precinct, every government office in the city. Of course he'd found her. She'd been foolish to think otherwise. I'm not going away, he continued, that reasonable tone more terrifying than any threat. We can do this the easy way, or we can involve your neighbors. Your choice. Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Chen, the young couple in 4C with the newborn baby. Elena thought of Victor's men flooding the building, asking questions, causing problems. These people had been kind to her. She wouldn't repay that kindness by bringing his world to their doorstep. Her hands trembling, Elena moved to the door. She kept the chain lock engaged as she opened it a crack. Victor stood in the hallway, somehow making the dingy space look even more pathetic by comparison. He'd changed out of the wetsuit into dark slacks and a black sweater that emphasized the dangerous grace of his build. His hair was still damp, swept back from his face. Water droplets clung to his eyelashes. He looked at her through the gap, and Elena saw a storm of emotions flicker across his features before his mask of control snapped back into place. Let me in, Elena. No. His jaw tightened. We need to talk. We have nothing to say to each other. I sent you divorce papers. You signed them. We're done. We are very far from done. His voice dropped lower, took on an edge that raised every hair on her body. You're carrying my child. Children, she corrected automatically, then cursed herself. Victor's eyes flared. What? Elena lifted her chin, trying to find some scrap of the courage that had allowed her to leave him in the first place. Twins, girls, and they're not yours. They're mine. The divorce ended whatever claim you thought you had. She saw his hands clench, watched him take a breath so deep his shoulders rose with it. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerously quiet. Elena, open this door, or I will break it down and reimburse your landlord tomorrow. Your choice, but either way we are having this conversation. You can't just, can't I? He leaned closer to the gap, and she could smell his cologne, that expensive scent that used to make her feel safe, and now just made her feel trapped. Test me, please. See how far I'm willing to go. Elena knew that tone, knew that he meant every word. With shaking hands, she unhooked the chain and stepped back. Victor entered her apartment like a king surveying conquered territory, taking in every detail with sharp, assessing eyes. The cramped space, the secondhand furniture, the tiny kitchenette with its ancient appliances. His gaze lingered on the pile of baby clothes Mrs. Rodriguez had left, the single crib she'd assembled in the corner, the stack of parenting books from the library. Evidence of a life she'd built without him. A future she'd planned that had no space for Victor Leone. He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her take an involuntary step backward. "This is where you've been living?" His voice was too calm, too controlled. "This is where you thought you could hide from me." "I wasn't hiding. I was leaving. There's a difference." "No, Elena, there really isn't." He moved closer, and she hated how her body wanted to respond to his proximity, how 6 months hadn't erased the muscle memory of belonging to him. "You ran away in the middle of the night like a thief, left divorce papers and no explanation, disappeared so completely my best investigators took 4 months to find a trace of you. And yet here you are, because you can't let anything go, can you? Can't let anyone choose to leave." His eyes flashed. "You didn't choose. You ran. Because staying was killing me." The words tore out of her, 6 months of buried resentment erupting. "Do you have any idea what it was like being married to you, being your wife?" "Enlighten me." He crossed his arms, that dangerous stillness settling over him. "It was suffocating. It was being followed everywhere by your security, having every decision made for me, being isolated from my friends because you decided they weren't safe, being treated like a possession you needed to protect instead of a partner you needed to trust." Elena's voice cracked, but she pushed forward. "I loved you. God help me. I loved you so much. But I couldn't breathe, Victor. Every day I felt myself getting smaller, quieter, less. You were consuming me, and you called it protection." Silence fell between them, broken only by the rain against the window and the muffled sound of the television from downstairs. Victor's face had gone very still, but she saw something flicker in his eyes, something that might have been pain if he'd allowed himself to feel it. "So you left," he said finally. "Took what was mine and disappeared. I'm not a thing to be owned. No, you're my wife. Ex-wife. We're divorced. A piece of paper doesn't change what you are to me." He took another step forward, and Elena felt the wall against her back. "Nothing changes that. Not time, not distance, not even your fear." "I'm not afraid of you." "Liar." The word was soft, almost gentle. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face but not quite touching. "You're terrified. You have been since the day we met. Not of me hurting you, I would never, but of what I make you feel, of how much you want to surrender to it." Elena's breath caught. "You're wrong." "Am I?" His hand finally made contact, fingers tracing the line of her jaw with devastating gentleness. "Then why are you shaking?" She jerked away from his touch, anger flaring hot and desperate. "Because you don't play fair. You never have. You use my feelings against me, turn love into leverage. That's not protection, Victor. That's manipulation." His hand dropped. For a long moment he just looked at her, and she saw something crack in that controlled facade. "I never meant to make you feel trapped," he said quietly. "Everything I did, the security, the boundaries, the control, it was because the thought of losing you kept me awake at night. Do you understand what you were to me? What you still are? A possession. Property. My heart." The words fell between them like stones. "You were my heart, Elena. In a world where everyone wants something from me, where trust is a liability and vulnerability gets you killed, you were the one clean thing, the one person who looked at me and saw something worth loving. I would have done anything to keep you safe. Anything." Elena felt tears burning her eyes. "But you never asked what I needed. You decided. You always decided." "Because I thought I knew better. Because I've lived in this world long enough to know every way it can destroy the things you love." Victor ran a hand through his hair, that perfect control finally fracturing. I've seen men lose their families to rival families. Seen children used as leverage, wives targeted for revenge. I couldn't let that happen to you. I wouldn't. So you built a cage and called it love. Yes. The admission was raw, stripped of pretense. I did. And I lost you anyway. I lost you because I was so afraid of losing you that I drove you away. I understand that now. I've had 6 months to understand it. Elena wrapped her arms around her stomach, feeling the twins shift restlessly. Then let me go. Let us go. We can't give you what you need, Victor. I can't be what you want me to be. What I want, he said slowly, his eyes dropping to her belly, is to know why you didn't tell me. When did you know? About a month after I left. She watched the information hit him, saw him do the math. You've known for 5 months that you were carrying my children, and you never thought to tell me. What would have been the point? You made it clear during our marriage that you didn't want children, that your world was too dangerous, too unstable. I was giving you what you wanted, freedom from the complication. What I wanted. Victor's laugh was bitter, hollow. Elena, I didn't want children with you because I was terrified I would fail them the way I failed at every decent thing I've ever tried to do. Not because I didn't want them. Not because the idea of you carrying my child didn't make me feel things I had no words for. Elena stared at him, seeing truth in every line of his face. You never said, I never say a lot of things. It's safer that way. Cleaner. He moved closer again, and this time she didn't retreat. But you're having my daughters, plural, and you thought you could just… What? Raise them alone in this place? Work yourself to exhaustion? Pretend I don't exist? I thought I could give them a better life than the one you would have controlled. And look how well that's working. His gesture encompassed the shabby apartment, her exhausted face, the reality of her situation. You're 6 months pregnant with twins, living in a 4th-floor walk-up, working jobs that pay under the table. How is that better, Elena? How is that the future you want for our daughters? The question hit harder than she wanted to admit, because he was right. She'd been surviving, not thriving, barely making rent, eating poorly because fresh food was expensive, lying awake at night wondering how she would handle 2 newborns in a studio apartment with no family, no support, no safety net. Pride and stubbornness had carried her this far, but she could feel those resources running dangerously low. I would have figured it out, she said, but the words lacked conviction. I know you would have. You're strong enough to do impossible things, leaving me prove that. Victor's voice softened, took on a tone she remembered from their best moments. But you don't have to do this alone. You shouldn't have to. What are you suggesting? Come home. Let me take care of you and our daughters. Let me give you the medical care you need, the security, the resources. You can hate me if you want. You can sleep in a separate wing of the house. But don't deprive our children of everything I can provide out of spite. Elena's chest tightened. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, but it's the reality we're facing. He reached out again, and this time his hand settled on her stomach. The twins immediately kicked against his palm, as if they recognized their father's touch. Victor's breath caught. They're real. They're really real. Of course they're real. I know. He looked up at her, and Elena saw something she'd never seen in Victor Leone's eyes before. Uncertainty. Vulnerability. Fear. I never let myself imagine this. Never let myself want it because I knew I would fail at it. And now it's happening whether I'm ready or not. Despite everything, Elena felt something soften in her chest. I'm terrified too. I have no idea what I'm doing. Then maybe we could be terrified together, learn together. His hand spread wider across her belly, protective and possessive in equal measure. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to trust me. I know I destroyed that. But let me be their father. Let me try. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. 6 months ago, she'd left because staying was destroying her. Now he was asking her to return, to walk back into that beautiful prison for the sake of the children he'd never wanted. Except he had wanted them. He'd just been too afraid to admit it. Just like she was too afraid to admit that part of her had never stopped loving him, had never stopped missing the way he made her feel when he wasn't trying to control every breath she took. I can't go back to the way things were, she said finally, opening her eyes to meet his. I won't. If I do this, if I even consider it, things have to be different. How different? I need autonomy, real autonomy, not the illusion of choice while you pull strings behind the scenes. I need to be a partner in decisions about our daughters, not just a vessel you're protecting. I need my own space, my own life. I need you to trust me enough to let me breathe. Victor was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he nodded slowly. I can try. I can't promise I'll be good at it. Controlling things is instinct for me, but I'll try. That's not good enough. It's the best I can offer. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I can change overnight who I've been for 40 years, but I'm willing to learn, willing to fail and try again. For them. His hand pressed more firmly against her belly. For you. Elena felt her resolve wavering, felt the exhaustion of 6 months of struggling alone finally catching up with her. The twins kicked again, a synchronized drumbeat that seemed to echo through her whole body. She was so tired, so scared, so completely out of her depth. And Victor, for all his flaws, was offering her a life raft, even if that life raft came with chains. I need to think about it, she said. How long? I don't know. A few days? A week? Victor's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. But you're not staying here while you think. This building isn't safe, and you're too far along to be climbing 4 flights of stairs every day. I can take care of myself. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I'm having a car brought around. You're going to a secure apartment I own in the city. Fully furnished, accessible with a doorman and security. You can have all the space you need to think, but you'll be safe. Victor, this is non-negotiable, Elena. Call it controlling if you want. Call it whatever makes you feel better. But you and my daughters are not spending another night in this place. His eyes met hers, and she saw the steel beneath the reasonable tone. Pack what you need. The rest can be collected tomorrow. Part of her wanted to fight, to refuse, to prove that she didn't need his protection or his resources. But the larger part, the part that was exhausted and pregnant and terrified of climbing those stairs one more time, just felt relief. She hated herself a little for it. But she nodded. Okay, but this doesn't mean I'm coming back to you. This is just temporary. Until I figure things out. Of course. Victor's expression didn't change, but she saw satisfaction flicker in his eyes. Whatever you need to tell yourself. And that, Elena thought as she moved to pack her meager belongings, was exactly the problem. Victor Leone had just gotten his foot back in the door, and they both knew he would never leave willingly again. The game had changed. The stakes were higher than they'd ever been, and Elena had no idea if she was strong enough to keep playing. But she was about to find out. The apartment Victor had arranged was everything her Brooklyn studio wasn't. Spacious, pristine, and located on the 32nd floor of a luxury building in Tribeca with views that stretched across the Hudson River. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with light even at midnight, the city sprawling below like a circuit board of possibilities and threats. Elena stood at those windows now, her reflection ghostly against the glass, watching Victor's men carry in her belongings from Brooklyn. It took them exactly 1 trip. The bedroom is through there, Victor said from behind her, his voice carefully neutral. There's a nursery already set up adjacent to it. I had my interior designer work from standard recommendations, but obviously you can change anything you want. Elena turned to face him. You had a nursery designed, in the 6 hours since you found me. I made a phone call. Money moves quickly when properly motivated. He gestured toward the hallway. There's also a guest room, a home office, and a kitchen that's actually functional. The building has 24-hour security, a doorman who knows not to let anyone up without your explicit permission, and a private elevator that requires a key card. A golden cage instead of a prison cell. How thoughtful. Victor's expression didn't change, but she saw his jaw tighten. You agreed to come here. I agreed to think. There's a difference. Elena moved past him into the living room, where his men were setting down the last of her boxes. They averted their eyes as she passed, trained not to look directly at her. She recognized Marco, Victor's head of security, a mountain of a man with hands that had undoubtedly killed for his boss. He nodded respectfully and left without a word. When they were alone, the silence felt heavy, with everything unsaid. Victor moved to the kitchen, opening cabinets that were already stocked with food. I had groceries delivered. High protein, lots of leafy greens, dairy. The doctor I consulted said that's important for twin pregnancies. You consulted a doctor? About me? Without asking. I consulted a doctor about twin pregnancies in general. I'm not a complete monster, Elena. I know the difference between gathering information and violating your privacy. He pulled out a bottle of prenatal vitamins, set it on the counter. Though I suspect you'll accuse me of the latter regardless. Elena sank onto the leather couch, exhaustion finally overwhelming her adrenaline. I don't know what you want me to say. Thank you for the prison that comes with a view. I want you to say you'll see a proper obstetrician, that you'll let someone who specializes in high-risk pregnancies make sure you and our daughters are healthy. Victor remained in the kitchen, maintaining distance as if he understood she needed space. You've been going to a free clinic in Queens. I checked. The doctor there is competent but overworked, and they don't have the equipment to properly monitor twins. You investigated me. Of course I did. The moment I saw you tonight, I activated every resource I have. I know where you've been living, where you've been working, what name you've been using. I know you've been cleaning offices at night and working at a bakery during the day. I know you collapsed from exhaustion 2 weeks ago and refused to take time off because you couldn't afford to. His voice remained level, but anger simmered beneath. So yes, Elena, I investigated, and what I found terrified me. She looked up at him, seeing the cracks in his composure. You don't get to be angry about choices I made to survive leaving you. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at myself for creating a situation where you felt you had to live like that, where you thought struggling alone was better than asking me for help. It was better, because help from you comes with strings. It always does. Victor crossed to the living room but didn't sit, standing instead with his hands in his pockets, a casual pose that didn't fool her for a second. What if I cut the strings? What if I gave you everything you needed with no expectations? You're not capable of that. Probably not, he admitted, but I could try. For them, I could try. Elena felt one of the twins kick, a rolling movement that pressed against her ribs. She winced, and Victor immediately moved closer. Are you all right? I'm fine. They're just active tonight. They don't like all the stress. She rubbed the spot where a tiny foot was creating a visible bump through her shirt. They've been kicking nonstop since I saw you at the crosswalk. May I? Victor gestured toward her stomach, and Elena saw hunger in his eyes. Not sexual, but something deeper, more primal. The need to connect with children he'd only learned about hours ago. She should say no, should maintain boundaries, keep him at arm's length, while she figured out what to do. But the twins were his too, whether she liked it or not. And some small, traitorous part of her wanted him to feel what she'd been feeling for months, the reality of these lives they'd created together. Okay, she said quietly. Victor knelt in front of the couch, his hands hovering uncertainly before settling gently on either side of her belly. The twins responded immediately, as if they recognized him on some instinctive level. A series of kicks and rolls rippled across Elena's stomach, and she watched Victor's face transform. Wonder. That was the only word for it. Pure, unguarded wonder. There are 2 of them in there, he said, his voice rough. 2 separate people. 2 daughters. Yes. Do they do this often? Constantly. Especially at night. I think they're training to be nightclub dancers. Elena tried to keep her tone light, but emotion caught in her throat as she watched this dangerous man kneel before her like a supplicant, his entire focus on the children moving beneath his hands. One of the twins kicked particularly hard, and Victor laughed, actually laughed, a sound Elena had heard maybe 3 times in their entire marriage. She's strong. They both are. The doctor at the clinic said they're measuring perfectly for their gestational age. Healthy heartbeats, good movement. They're fighters. Like their mother, Victor said, looking up at her. You fought me. Left when you knew I would come after you. Built a life from nothing. Kept yourself and them alive through sheer determination. That takes a kind of strength most people never develop. Elena felt tears prickling her eyes. Don't do that. Don't say things that make me want to forgive you. Why not? Because forgiveness means letting you back in, and letting you back in means losing myself again. I can't do that, Victor. Not even for them. His hands remained on her stomach, but his expression grew serious. What if you didn't have to lose yourself? What if I could love you without consuming you? You don't know how to do that. Then teach me. The words were simple, devastatingly sincere. Tell me what you need, not what you think I want to hear, not what will keep the peace. Tell me the truth, and I'll listen. Elena stared at him, this man who'd been the center of her world for 3 years, who'd loved her with an intensity that had been both exhilarating and suffocating. She saw the lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair, the weight he carried in every controlled movement. I need you to see me as a partner, not a possession. I need autonomy to make my own choices, even if you think they're wrong. I need friends, a life outside your world, space to breathe. I need to know that if I stay, it's because I'm choosing you every day, not because you've built walls so high I can't find the exit. Her voice cracked. I need to know that your love won't slowly erase me until there's nothing left but an echo of who I used to be. Victor was quiet for a long moment, his hand still resting on her belly, as the twins continued their acrobatics. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and measured. I can't promise I'll be good at giving you those things. Control is how I've survived, Elena. It's how I've built everything I have. Letting go feels like stepping off a cliff with no guarantee there's ground below. I know, but I can promise I'll try. I can promise that when I fail, and I will fail, I'll listen when you tell me. I can promise that I'll value your voice, your choices, your autonomy, even when every instinct I have screams to lock you away somewhere safe. He paused. And I can promise that I'll never stop fighting for this. For us. For the family we could be if you'll give me the chance. Elena wanted to believe him. Wanted to think that love could change someone so fundamentally that Victor Leone could become a man who understood partnership instead of possession. But she'd learned the hard way that people didn't transform overnight, and promises made in crisis had a way of evaporating once the emergency passed. I need time, she said again. I know. That's why I'm leaving. Victor removed his hands from her stomach and stood. This apartment is yours. Marco will be stationed in the building for security, but he won't enter without your permission. You have my private number. Use it if you need anything, medical or otherwise. You're just leaving? No demands, no ultimatums? You asked for space. I'm giving it to you. He moved toward the door, then paused. But Elena, I meant what I said. You and our daughters are my priority now. Everything else, the business, the territory, all of it, comes second. So take your time. Figure out what you need. But understand that I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be a father to those girls, whether you let me back into your life or not. The door closed behind him with a soft click, leaving Elena alone in her beautiful new cage. She sat for a long time, watching the city lights blur through her tears, feeling her daughters move restlessly inside her. Finally, she dragged herself to the bedroom Victor had mentioned. The nursery took her breath away. It wasn't pink or frilly or covered in butterflies. Instead, Victor's designer had created something sophisticated and warm. Cream walls with forest green accents, 2 cribs made of rich walnut wood, a rocking chair positioned between them upholstered in soft gray velvet. Educational mobiles hung above each crib, black and white patterns designed to stimulate infant vision. A changing table, a dresser already stocked with tiny clothes in neutral colors, shelves of board books and soft toys. It was perfect. It was everything she would have chosen herself if money had been no object. And it terrified her because it showed how well Victor still knew her, how easily he could anticipate her wants and make them reality. Elena sank into the rocking chair, her hand finding her belly again. Your father is a complicated man, she whispered to the twins. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to love him without losing myself. I don't know if people like us can have happy endings. The babies kicked in response, their movements synchronizing in a way that made Elena smile despite her tears. She must have fallen asleep there, because when she woke, dawn was painting the sky pink and gold, and her neck ached from the awkward angle. Elena hauled herself up and wandered to the kitchen, where she found a note on the counter in Victor's precise handwriting. Dr. Sarah Chen, Metropolitan Hospital, High-risk pregnancy specialist. I've made you an appointment for 10 a.m. tomorrow. She's expecting you, but there's no obligation. The choice is yours. Elena crumpled the note in her fist, then smoothed it out again. The choice is yours. Such simple words. Words Victor had never said to her during their marriage. Maybe he could change. Maybe this crisis had cracked something open in him, made space for growth. Or maybe this was just another form of control, so subtle she wouldn't recognize the cage until it had already closed around her. She was still holding the note when her phone rang. The burner she'd been using, the number only 3 people knew. Elena checked the screen and felt her blood run cold. Unknown number. But the area code was one she recognized from her old life, from the world she'd tried to leave behind. She answered against her better judgment. Elena Ward. The voice was male, cultured, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Or should I say Elena Leone? I understand congratulations are in order. Who is this? A friend of your husband's. Well, ex-husband, though perhaps that status is about to change? The man chuckled, a sound like breaking glass. I'm calling to deliver a message. Victor has something that belongs to me. I'd like it back. And if he's not cooperative, I think I might need some leverage. You understand? Elena's hand instinctively covered her stomach. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. You're just an innocent party in all this. A woman who ran away from her controlling husband only to get pulled back in by biology. It's almost Shakespearean. The voice hardened. Tell Victor that Konstantin Volkov knows about his precious cargo. Tell him that if he wants to keep his new family intact, he'll return what he stole from me. He has 48 hours. The line went dead. Elena stood frozen in the kitchen, her heart hammering, her mind racing. She didn't know who Konstantin Volkov was, but the threat was clear enough. Someone knew about the twins. Someone was willing to use them as leverage against Victor. This was exactly what she'd feared. This was why Victor had said his world was too dangerous for children. She should call him, should warn him immediately that whatever he'd gotten himself into had now extended to their unborn daughters. But calling him meant acknowledging that she needed him, meant pulling him back into her orbit when she'd been trying so hard to maintain distance. Elena looked down at her belly, at the visible outline of tiny feet pressing against her skin. Then she picked up her phone and dialed Victor's number. He answered on the first ring. Elena, what's wrong? Someone just called me. A man named Konstantin Volkov. He said you have something that belongs to him, and he's threatening the twins if you don't return it. The silence on the other end was absolute. Victor? Stay where you are. Don't open the door for anyone except Marco. I'm on my way. His voice had gone cold, lethal. And Elena? This changes everything. Whatever time you needed to think, we don't have it anymore. Not if Volkov is making moves. What does he want? What did you take from him? Nothing he deserved to keep, but that's not a conversation for the phone. She heard him moving, barking orders to someone in the background. 20 minutes. I'll explain everything. Just stay safe. He hung up before she could respond. Elena sank onto the couch, her whole body trembling. 24 hours ago, her biggest problem had been making rent. Now she was caught in the crosshairs of what sounded like a mafia war, carrying the children of a man who'd just been threatened by someone dangerous enough to make Victor Leone sound worried. She'd been right to run 6 months ago, right to think his world would eventually destroy her. But she'd been wrong to think she could escape it, because now his world was coming for her daughters, and there was nowhere left to hide. When Victor arrived 17 minutes later, he wasn't alone. Marco preceded him into the apartment along with 2 other men Elena didn't recognize. They spread out immediately, checking the windows, the locks, positions that would allow them to monitor all entry points. Victor looked different. The careful control from last night had been replaced by something harder, more dangerous. This was the man who ruled the New York underworld, not the one who'd knelt before her and marveled at his daughter's kicking. Tell me exactly what he said. Word for word. Elena repeated the conversation as precisely as she could remember. Victor's expression grew darker with each sentence. 48 hours, he said when she finished. He's giving me 48 hours to return the shipment I intercepted 3 weeks ago. What shipment? Weapons. High-grade military equipment being smuggled through the port for sale to terrorist organizations. I got a tip about the operation and decided the world would be better off without Volkov having that kind of firepower. Victor paced the length of the living room, that predatory grace on full display. I had my people seize the shipment and turn it over to federal authorities anonymously. Volkov lost $15 million and his reputation took a hit. I assumed he'd retaliate eventually, but I didn't think he'd move this fast. And you didn't think to mention this when you were convincing me to stay in your secure apartment? I didn't know he'd connected you to me yet. I've had people watching for any sign of surveillance, any indication he'd discovered our situation. Victor stopped pacing, faced her directly. I was protecting you by keeping you at a distance, by letting you stay anonymous. The moment I brought you back into my life, I painted a target on you. So this is my fault? For letting you find me? No. This is my fault for underestimating how thoroughly Volkov would investigate me once I cost him that much money. Victor's hands clenched into fists, and it's my fault for not destroying him completely when I had the chance. I showed mercy, I let him live, and now he's threatening my family. The word hung in the air between them. Family. Not just children, not just Elena. Family. What are you going to do? Elena asked quietly. End this. Permanently. The look in Victor's eyes sent ice down her spine. Volkov thinks he can use you and our daughters as leverage. He thinks I'll fold, return something I don't even have anymore, negotiate from a position of weakness. He's wrong. Victor, you can't just... Can't what? Protect my family? Eliminate a threat that's targeting my pregnant ex-wife? He moved closer, and Elena saw something feral beneath his controlled exterior. You wanted to know who I really am, Elena? This is who I am. I'm a man who will burn down the world before I let anyone harm what's mine. We're not yours. Aren't you? He reached out, cupped her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence in his voice. You're carrying my children. You're living in my apartment. And whether you admit it or not, you called me the moment you felt threatened. That makes you mine. That makes this my responsibility. Elena should pull away, should maintain the boundaries she'd been trying to establish. But fear was a powerful thing, and right now Victor felt like the only solid ground in a world that had just tilted dangerously. What if he hurts them? What if something you do causes Volkov to retaliate against the twins? He won't get the chance. Victor's thumb traced her cheekbone, his eyes blazing with certainty. I'm moving you somewhere safer, somewhere Volkov doesn't know about. You'll have security around the clock, medical staff on call. You'll be completely protected while I handle this. You mean while you start a war? I mean while I end one that Volkov started the moment he threatened you. Victor dropped his hand, stepped back. I need you to trust me, Elena. Just this once. Trust that I can keep you safe. Elena looked at this man who'd been her husband, her prison guard, her great love and greatest mistake. She thought about the twins moving inside her, about how vulnerable they were, how completely dependent on the choices she made right now. She thought about Konstantin Volkov's cold voice promising violence if Victor didn't comply. Where? She asked finally. Relief flashed across Victor's face. A estate upstate. 3 hours from the city, completely off the grid. It's where I go when I need to disappear. No one knows about it except my most trusted people. How long? However long it takes to eliminate the threat. Could be days. Could be a week. He pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. Pack enough for a week. Comfortable clothes, anything you need for the twins. Marco will help you, and we'll leave within the hour. What about the doctor's appointment, the one you scheduled? Dr. Chen can meet us at the estate. I'll have her come to you. Victor was already moving, coordinating with his men, transforming from the man who touched her with wonder to the crime lord who commanded absolute obedience. Elena watched him work, watched the machine of his power activate with terrifying efficiency, and understood something she'd been trying to deny. She'd never really escaped Victor Leone. And now, with their daughters' lives hanging in the balance, she wasn't sure she wanted to. The choice had been taken from her the moment she'd stepped into that crosswalk. All that remained was deciding whether to fight the inevitable or surrender to it. And as Victor's hand found hers, guiding her toward the bedroom to pack, Elena realized the surrender had already begun. She was just too tired to fight it anymore. The estate materialized from the darkness like something out of a Gothic novel, all stone and shadows against the backdrop of dense forest. Elena pressed her face to the SUV window, watching as iron gates swung open automatically, allowing their convoy to wind up a long drive flanked by ancient oaks. Security lights flickered on as they passed, illuminating manicured grounds that stretched into darkness on all sides. "How long have you owned this place?" she asked, breaking the silence that had held since they'd left the city 3 hours ago. 12 years. I bought it the year before I met you." Victor sat beside her in the back seat, his hand resting protectively on her thigh, a gesture he'd maintained for the entire drive, as if touching her could ward off the threats gathering in the shadows. It belonged to a steel magnate in the 20s. He built it as a fortress for his mistress, somewhere his wife would never find them. How romantic, a house built on deception. Or on the need for sanctuary, depends on your perspective. Victor's thumb traced idle circles against her leg, a habit from their marriage that her body remembered even if her mind resisted. The previous owner appreciated privacy. So do I. The SUV pulled up to a massive front entrance where warm light spilled from tall windows. Marco and his team had arrived ahead of them, and Elena could see armed men positioned at strategic points around the property. This wasn't a home, it was a compound. Victor helped her out of the vehicle with careful hands, as if she might shatter. The night air smelled of pine and approaching winter, crisp and clean compared to the city's perpetual haze. Elena pulled her coat tighter around her belly, feeling the twins shift in protest at the cold. "Inside," Victor murmured, guiding her up the stone steps. "Dr. Chen is waiting for you." The interior was breathtaking, soaring ceilings with exposed beams, a grand staircase that curved upward into darkness, furniture that managed to be both antique and comfortable. But what caught Elena's attention was the woman standing in the foyer, medical bag in hand, her expression warm and professional. Dr. Sarah Chen was younger than Elena expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the calm demeanor of someone who'd delivered enough babies to find nothing surprising anymore. "Mrs. Leone," she said, extending her hand. "I'm glad we finally meet. Victor has told me so much about you and the twins." "It's just Elena. We're divorced." "Of course, my apologies." Dr. Chen's smile didn't waver. "I understand you've been through quite an ordeal today. Why don't we get you checked out, make sure all that stress hasn't affected the babies?" Elena glanced at Victor, who nodded encouragingly. "I'll have Marco show you to your room." "Doctor, Chen can examine you there, make sure you're comfortable." The room turned out to be a suite on the second floor, overlooking the grounds. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, dressed in soft linens that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent in Brooklyn. French doors opened onto a balcony, though Victor immediately moved to lock them, his paranoia evident in every careful gesture. "You'll be safe here," he said quietly. "I promise you that. The way you promised me safety in our marriage, by turning my life into a surveillance state?" Victor's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, but here we are anyway." Elena sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion finally overwhelming her adrenaline. "Just let the doctor do her job. Then you can tell me whatever plan you're formulating to handle Volkov." He looked like he wanted to argue, but Dr. Chen intervened smoothly. "Why don't you give us some privacy, Victor? I need to conduct a thorough examination, and Elena will be more relaxed without an audience." For a moment, Elena thought he might refuse. The old Victor would have insisted on staying, on controlling every aspect of the situation, but something in his expression shifted, and he nodded. "I'll be right outside if you need me." The door closed behind him, and Elena felt some of the tension drain from her shoulders. Dr. Chen set down her bag and pulled out a portable ultrasound machine. "He's intense, isn't he?" "That's one word for it." "But he cares. I've worked with a lot of expectant fathers over the years, and I can tell you, the ones who arrange for specialists to make house calls at midnight genuinely care." The doctor washed her hands in the attached bathroom, then returned with a warm, professional smile. "Now, let's see how these little ones are doing. When was your last ultrasound?" 3 weeks ago, at the clinic in Queens." "And everything looked normal?" "They said so. Both babies measuring on track, heartbeats strong. Elena lay back as instructed, lifting her shirt to expose her rounded belly. But I've been under a lot of stress since then. Stress happens. The human body is remarkably resilient, especially when it's protecting new life. Dr. Chen spread warm gel across Elena's stomach, and the familiar pressure of the ultrasound wand followed. Let's take a look. The screen flickered to life, showing the now familiar landscape of Elena's womb. Two distinct forms curled together, sharing space with remarkable efficiency. The sound of dual heartbeats filled the room, strong and steady. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. No matter how many times she heard those sounds, they never failed to move her. "There's baby A," Dr. Chen narrated, pointing to the screen. "Good size, active. And baby B is right there, looking equally healthy." Their positioning is excellent, both head down, which is exactly what we want to see at this stage. "They're really okay? The stress didn't hurt them?" "They're perfect, measuring at about 27 weeks, which matches your timeline. Amniotic fluid levels are good, placentas are well positioned, no signs of distress." Dr. Chen moved the wand, capturing different angles. "You're doing an excellent job growing these babies, Elena. They're thriving." Relief flooded through Elena so powerfully she had to close her eyes against it. "Thank you." "However," Dr. Chen continued, her tone shifting slightly, "I do want to talk to you about what happens next. Twin pregnancies are considered high risk even under ideal circumstances. Add in the stress you've been under, and we need to be proactive about monitoring." "What does that mean?" "It means weekly appointments from now until delivery. Ultrasounds every 2 weeks to check growth and positioning. Immediate attention if you experience any cramping, bleeding, or decrease in fetal movement." The doctor cleaned the gel from Elena's stomach and helped her sit up. "It also means taking better care of yourself. Proper nutrition, adequate rest, minimizing stress as much as possible." Elena laughed bitterly. "Minimizing stress. Right. Because my life is so conducive to that right now." Dr. Chen's expression softened. "I understand this situation is complicated. Victor briefed me on the general circumstances, not the details, just enough for me to understand the security concerns. But Elena, your primary job right now is growing those babies. Everything else, including whatever's happening between you and Victor, has to take second priority." "Easy to say. Harder to do when there's a Russian mobster threatening my children, which is exactly why you're here in a secure location, with people protecting you." The doctor packed up her equipment. "Let Victor handle the external threats. You focus on staying healthy. Deal?" Elena wanted to argue that it wasn't that simple, that her relationship with Victor was its own kind of threat. But the twins shifted inside her, reminding her of what actually mattered. "Deal," she said quietly. Dr. Chen left detailed instructions about diet and rest, along with her personal cell number for emergencies. When Victor returned, the doctor pulled him aside for a conversation Elena couldn't hear but could read in their body language. Dr. Chen firm and insistent, Victor nodding with the intensity he brought to everything. Then they were alone again, the massive room suddenly feeling too intimate. "She says you're not getting enough rest," Victor said, moving to close the curtains against the darkness outside. "That you've been working too hard, eating poorly, pushing yourself beyond safe limits." "I was surviving. That's what people do when they don't have unlimited resources. You have them now. Use them." He turned to face her, and Elena saw the strain around his eyes, the weight he was carrying. "I know you think accepting help from me means surrendering your independence, but right now, independence is a luxury neither you nor our daughters can afford. So I should just let you take over my life again? Let you make all the decisions while I smile and comply? I'm asking you to let me keep you safe while I eliminate the threat. That's not the same as controlling your life." "Isn't it?" Elena stood, needing movement to channel her frustration. "You decided to intercept Volkov's shipment without thinking about consequences. You brought me to this estate without asking if I wanted to come. You scheduled appointments and made plans and activated your small army, all without consulting me once. How is that different from every other decision you made during our marriage?" Victor was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and strained. "You're right. I'm doing exactly what I've always done, taking action without considering your input. Old habits die hard. The admission surprised her. Elena had expected defensiveness, justification, the usual arguments about protection trumping autonomy. "So what are you going to do about it?" she challenged. "Tell you the truth, all of it, then let you decide how you want me to proceed." Victor moved to the sitting area by the fireplace, gesturing for her to join him. "You deserve to know what you're caught in the middle of." Elena settled into one of the chairs, her hand automatically finding her belly. "I'm listening." Victor paced as he talked, that restless energy that had always marked him when he was strategizing. Konstantin Volkov runs weapons through New York to clients around the world, militias, cartels, terrorist organizations. He's not loyal to any cause except profit, which makes him particularly dangerous. 3 weeks ago, I received information that he was moving a shipment of military-grade equipment through the port. Assault rifles, explosives, anti-aircraft weapons. Enough firepower to arm a small revolution. And you stopped it. I intercepted it, had my people seize the shipment and deliver it to federal authorities through a cutout who couldn't be traced back to me. Volkov lost the merchandise and the money his buyers had already paid him. It damaged his reputation, made him look weak to his competitors. "Why?" Elena asked. "Why risk going after someone that dangerous when it wasn't your business?" Victor stopped pacing, met her eyes. "Because some of those weapons were headed to a group planning an attack on a school, an elementary school in Connecticut. I saw the intelligence, saw the plans they'd made, and I couldn't just let it happen." Elena's breath caught. "Children." "Yes. So I made the choice to stop it, consequences be damned. I knew Volkov would retaliate eventually, but I thought I had time to prepare. I thought I could protect my assets and my people before he made his move." Victor's hands clenched. "I didn't know about you yet. Didn't know you were pregnant and vulnerable and exactly the kind of leverage someone like Volkov dreams of finding." The pieces clicked into place. Why Victor had been so insistent on security, why he'd moved her immediately, why fear had flashed in his eyes when she'd mentioned Volkov's call. "He'll kill us if you don't give him what he wants," Elena said quietly. "The twins and me. We're collateral damage in your war." "No, you're the reason I'm going to end this war permanently." Victor knelt in front of her chair, his hands covering hers where they rested on her stomach. "Volkov made a fatal mistake when he threatened you. He showed me exactly how far he's willing to go, which means I know exactly how far I need to go to stop him." "What are you planning?" "I'm meeting with him tomorrow night. Neutral ground, negotiated terms. He thinks I'm going to try to bargain, offer him money to compensate for the shipment. He's wrong." Elena's heart began to pound. "Victor, you can't just walk into a meeting with a man who's threatening your family. It's obviously a trap." "Of course it's a trap, but it's also an opportunity. Volkov is arrogant. He thinks he holds all the cards because he knows about you and the twins. He won't expect me to turn the tables." Victor's expression was cold, calculating. "I've spent the last 3 hours coordinating with people who owe me favors. People in positions to make Volkov's life very difficult very quickly. By the time I walk into that meeting, I'll have leverage he can't ignore. And if something goes wrong, if he decides to kill you and send his people after us anyway, that won't happen. You can't guarantee that." "Yes, I can." Victor squeezed her hands gently. "Because I've already made arrangements. If anything happens to me, you and the twins will be protected. Marco has instructions, resources set aside, contacts who will get you out of the country and establish you somewhere Volkov's reach doesn't extend. You'll be safe no matter what." The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified Elena because it meant Victor was preparing for the possibility of his own death. "I don't want your contingency plans," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't want to raise our daughters alone, wondering if the man who killed their father might come for them someday. I want you to find a solution that doesn't involve you walking into danger." "There is no such solution. Not anymore. Volkov drew a line when he threatened you. I have to respond, or I look weak. And if I look weak, every enemy I've ever made will see an opening." Victor released one of her hands to cup her face. "This is the world I live in, Elena. The world I've always lived in. I can't negotiate my way out of it or buy my way clear. Sometimes violence is the only language that translates." "Then get out. Walk away from all of it. We could leave the country together, start over somewhere safe." "I'm not built for running. And even if I were, Volkov would find us eventually. Men like him don't forget. They don't forgive. The only way to truly end this is to eliminate the threat at its source. His thumb traced her cheekbone, that familiar gesture of tenderness. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Elena looked into his eyes and saw the truth there. He was going to do this regardless of what she said. This wasn't a request for permission. It was a warning, a chance to prepare herself for what was coming. I don't trust you not to get yourself killed, she said honestly. I don't trust that your plan is as foolproof as you think it is, but I trust that you'll do everything in your power to come back to us. Is that enough? It's more than I deserve. Victor leaned forward, pressed his forehead to hers. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make our world safe for our daughters. And then I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can be the man you need me to be. That's a lot of promises. I'm good at keeping promises. It's one of my few redeeming qualities. Despite everything, Elena felt a small smile tug at her lips. Your ego is another one. Very entertaining. There's the woman I married, sharp-tongued and unimpressed by my dramatics. Victor pulled back, his own smile flickering across his face before fading. I need to go make some calls, finalize details for tomorrow. Will you be all right here? Do I have a choice? You always have a choice, Elena, even when it doesn't feel like it. He stood, moved toward the door, then paused. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. Marco is stationed right outside your door if you need anything. And my room is at the end of the hall if you want company. Don't hold your breath on that last one. Wouldn't dream of it. His hand rested on the doorknob. Get some rest. Dr. Chen says you need it. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone with her thoughts and her fear and the two lives growing inside her. She moved to the window, pulling back the curtain to stare out at the dark grounds. Security lights created pools of illumination, and she could see guards moving in coordinated patterns. Victor's small army, protecting his latest acquisition. Except she wasn't an acquisition anymore. She was the mother of his children, which somehow made everything more complicated. Elena's hand found her belly, feeling the reassuring movement of the twins. Your father is going to war for you, she whispered. For us. And I don't know if that makes him a hero or just a man who can't let go of control long enough to find a peaceful solution. The babies kicked in response, and Elena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She'd spent 6 months convincing herself she was better off without Victor Leone. 6 months building a life that didn't revolve around his intensity, his need to control, his suffocating version of love. But standing here in his fortress, carrying his daughters, waiting while he prepared to face down a threat she'd inadvertently brought into their lives, Elena had to admit a terrible truth. She'd never stopped loving him. She'd just learned to love herself enough to leave. And now the universe was asking if she could do both. Love Victor and maintain her autonomy, be his partner without being his possession. Elena didn't know the answer, but she knew that tomorrow, when Victor walked into that meeting with Konstantin Volkov, she would be holding her breath until he came back. Because losing him now, after everything, would break something inside her that no amount of independence could repair. The night stretched long and sleepless ahead of her, filled with fear and possibility in equal measure. Morning came gray and cold, winter asserting itself with frost that painted the windows in crystalline patterns. Elena woke in the massive bed, disoriented until memory rushed back. The estate. Volkov. Victor's plan to end the threat by walking directly into its teeth. She found her way downstairs following the smell of coffee and bacon. The kitchen was enormous. All commercial-grade appliances and granite countertops, clearly designed for staff to prepare meals for large gatherings. But this morning, only Victor occupied the space, standing at the stove with the focused intensity he brought to everything. You cook? Elena asked from the doorway. Victor looked up, something softening in his expression when he saw her. Occasionally, when I need to think with my hands. He gestured to the table, already set with fresh fruit, yogurt, and a glass of orange juice. Sit. Dr. Chen left specific instructions about your breakfast requirements. Elena settled into a chair, accepting the plate he brought her, scrambled eggs with cheese, whole grain toast, strips of bacon. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. You're eating for 3, and one of those 3 is me worrying about whether you're taking care of yourself. Victor poured her juice, then coffee for himself. How did you sleep? Barely. You? Not at all. He sat across from her, and Elena saw the evidence in the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. I've been coordinating final details for the meeting. It's set for 8 p.m. at a warehouse in Red Hook. Neutral ground. Both sides limited to 5 men each. That doesn't sound neutral. That sounds like a recipe for violence. Violence is inevitable at this point. The question is who controls it. Victor sipped his coffee, his gaze distant. I've arranged for federal agents to be in position around the perimeter. If Volkov makes any moves against me, they'll intervene. And I've ensured that certain information about his operations will reach law enforcement if anything happens to me. You're using yourself as bait. I'm using leverage. There's a difference. He set down his cup, focused on her fully. Elena, I need you to understand something. Men like Volkov respect power. They respond to strength. If I try to negotiate from a position of weakness, he'll see it as surrender and push harder. But if I walk in with enough leverage to destroy him, he'll listen. He'll back down. Or he'll decide you're too dangerous to leave alive and kill you anyway. That's why I'm bringing leverage he can't ignore. Insurance that makes me more valuable alive than dead. Elena pushed food around her plate, her appetite gone. What kind of insurance? The kind that involves federal warrants, frozen assets, and information that would send half his organization to prison. Victor's smile was cold. I told you I've been making calls. Turns out a lot of people in very official positions are happy to help when you provide them with evidence of weapons trafficking. You're going to turn him in to the authorities? I'm going to give him the choice. Leave New York, abandon his operations here, and live to rebuild somewhere else, or face federal prosecution that will end with him dying in a supermax prison. Most men choose survival when given the option. It was brilliant, Elena had to admit. Classic Victor, finding the pressure point that would force compliance without requiring him to get his hands dirty. But it was also dangerous because it assumed Volkov would respond rationally rather than emotionally. What if he's too proud to run? She asked quietly. What if he'd rather go down fighting than accept defeat? Then he dies, and his organization collapses, and the threat ends anyway. Victor reached across the table, covered her hand with his. I know you think I'm being reckless, but I've been playing this game for 20 years, Elena. I know how men like Volkov think. I know what motivates them, and I know that right now he believes threatening you gives him power over me. I'm going to show him exactly how wrong he is. Elena turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll walk away if it goes wrong. If the situation turns and you have a chance to leave, you'll take it. Don't let pride or ego keep you in a fight you can't win. Victor's jaw tightened. I'm not running from this. I'm not asking you to run. I'm asking you to survive. For them. She placed his hand on her belly, where the twins were beginning their morning gymnastics routine. They need a father, Victor. A live one. So promise me that if things go sideways, you'll choose them over your reputation. She watched him struggle with it, saw the war between his instincts and her request. Finally, he nodded. I promise. If the situation becomes untenable, I'll extract myself. For them. It wasn't everything Elena wanted, but it was more than she'd expected. Thank you. They finished breakfast in silence, both lost in thoughts about the hours ahead. When Victor stood to leave, Elena found herself standing too, moving into his space before she could think better of it. Come back to us, she said, her hands fisting in his shirt. Whatever it takes, whatever you have to do, just come back. Victor's arms came around her, careful of her belly, and Elena felt the tremor that ran through him, fear or anticipation or some combination of both. I will. I swear to you, I will. His lips found her forehead, pressed there with devastating gentleness. And when this is over, we're going to have a long conversation about what comes next, about whether you can forgive me enough to let me be a real father to our daughters, whether we can find a way forward that doesn't involve either of us sacrificing who we are. One crisis at a time, Elena murmured against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, expensive cologne and coffee and something uniquely Victor. First survive, then we'll figure out the rest. Deal. He held her for another moment, then released her and stepped back. When he walked out of the kitchen, his shoulders were set with determination, his stride confident. But Elena saw the truth in the rigid line of his spine, the controlled precision of his movements. Victor Leone was terrified, and he was walking toward danger anyway because that was what men like him did. They faced threats head-on rather than showing weakness. They protected what was theirs with every resource at their disposal. And they died, sometimes, because pride didn't stop bullets or knives or men who had nothing left to lose. Elena pressed a hand to her belly, feeling her daughters moving restlessly inside her. "Please," she whispered to whatever forces might be listening. "Please let him come back to us. Let him be as smart and prepared as he thinks he is. Let his plan work." The twins kicked in response, and Elena tried to find comfort in their vitality, their absolute trust that the world would provide what they needed. She spent the day trying to distract herself, reading the parenting books stacked in her room, taking a short walk around the grounds with Marco hovering protectively nearby, attempting to eat the lunch the estate's cook prepared. But every minute felt like an hour, and every hour brought 8 p.m. closer. Dr. Chen called in the afternoon to check on her. "How are you holding up?" "I'm terrified." "Does that count as a medical concern?" "Completely normal given the circumstances. Just try to keep your breathing steady, stay hydrated, and remember that stress is temporary. Your babies are strong? They'll be fine regardless of what you're feeling right now." "What if Victor doesn't come back?" There was a pause. "Then you'll do what women have done for millennia. You'll survive anyway. You'll raise those girls and love them and give them the best life you can." "But Elena, I've known Victor for 5 years. I've seen him navigate impossible situations and come out victorious every time. If anyone can handle this, it's him." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they just reminded Elena of how much Victor thrived on danger, how being threatened seemed to bring him fully alive. By 7 p.m., she was pacing her room, unable to sit still. Marco knocked once, bringing dinner she couldn't eat. "He'll be fine, ma'am," the big man said quietly. "I've never seen the boss lose when he's properly motivated. And you and those babies? That's the most motivated I've ever seen him." "You're not going with him." "No, my job is here, keeping you safe." "But he's got good men with him, trained men. They'll make sure he comes home." After Marco left, Elena returned to the window, watching darkness settle over the grounds. Somewhere in the city, Victor was preparing for his meeting, checking weapons, maybe, or reviewing his leverage one final time, doing whatever dangerous men did before they walked into potential death. 8 p.m. came and went. Elena's phone remained silent. She hadn't expected updates. Victor had made clear that once the meeting started, communication would cease until it was over. But the silence was crushing, heavy with all the terrible possibilities. 9 p.m., 10, 11. Elena sat in the chair by the window, her hands on her belly, whispering reassurances to daughters who couldn't understand but seemed to sense her distress anyway. They moved restlessly, kicking and rolling in what felt like anxiety. "He's going to come back," she told them. "He promised, and your father, for all his faults, keeps his promises." At 11:47 p.m., headlights swept up the drive. Elena's heart stopped, then lurched back into rhythm so violently she felt dizzy. She pressed her face to the window, watching as 2 SUVs pulled up to the house. The doors opened and men emerged. Marco was already downstairs. She heard voices, footsteps. Then Victor appeared, stepping out of the second vehicle, and Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He was alive. He was walking. He was back. She didn't remember deciding to move, but suddenly she was running, as much as a pregnant woman could run, out of the room, down the hallway, taking the stairs as quickly as she dared. She heard Marco saying something, heard Victor's voice responding, and then she was in the foyer and he was there, turning toward her with surprise and relief flooding his features. Elena crashed into him with all the grace of a freight train, her arms wrapping around him as tightly as her belly would allow. Victor caught her, his hands steadying her, his voice low in her ear. "Easy, easy. I'm all right. We're all right." "I thought," her voice broke. "When it got so late, I thought, I know, I'm sorry." It took longer than expected to finalize everything. Victor pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands framing her jaw. "But it's done. Volkov is gone. The threat is eliminated." Elena searched his face, looking for injuries, for blood, for any sign that he'd paid a price for this victory. But he looked unharmed, just tired and rumpled and achingly familiar. What happened? Tell me everything. Let's get you sitting down first. You shouldn't be on your feet after running down those stairs. Victor guided her to the living room, settled her on the couch with careful hands. Then he sank down beside her, and Elena saw the exhaustion in every line of his body. Volkov came to the meeting expecting to negotiate my surrender, Victor began, his voice flat with fatigue. He had his men, his weapons, his confidence that threatening you gave him ultimate leverage. What he didn't have was information about the federal warrants that had been issued for his arrest 2 hours earlier. You had him arrested? I provided evidence to the FBI about his weapons trafficking operation. Routes, contacts, financial records, everything needed to build a case that would put him away for life. The warrants were issued at 6 p.m. By the time we met at 8, he was already a wanted man. He just didn't know it yet. Victor's smile was grim. I gave him a choice. Leave the country immediately, abandon his operations in New York, and I'd delay the warrants long enough for him to disappear. Or refuse, and federal agents would move in within the hour. He ran. Took a private plane to somewhere without an extradition treaty, left his second-in-command to clean up the mess. His organization is in chaos, his assets are being seized, and he'll never set foot in this country again without facing immediate arrest. Victor's hand found hers, squeezed gently. It's over, Elena. Truly over. He can't touch you or our daughters. No one can. Relief crashed through Elena so powerfully she felt tears burning her eyes. You did it. You actually did it. I told you I would. I told you I'd make our world safe. Victor pulled her against his chest, his arms coming around her with a security that felt different from the suffocating control she remembered. This felt like protection without possession, like strength offered instead of imposed. I keep my promises. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped around each other, feeling the twins shift and kick between them. Elena let herself cry, releasing 6 months of tension and fear and desperate hope. Victor held her through it, his hand stroking her hair, his breathing steady against her temple. What happens now? She finally asked, pulling back to look at him. Now we figure out what comes next. For us. For our daughters. For whatever this, he gestured between them, is becoming. I don't know what it is. Neither do I. But I know I don't want to lose it. Lose you. Not again. Victor's thumb traced her cheekbone, wiped away the last of her tears. I know I failed you during our marriage. I know I made you feel trapped and controlled and invisible, but I want the chance to do better, to be better, to learn how to love you without consuming you. Elena looked into his eyes and saw truth there, raw and unguarded. That's not something that happens overnight. I know, but we have time now. No threats, no emergencies forcing our hand. Just time to figure out if we can build something better from the wreckage of what we had before. I need autonomy, real autonomy. You'll have it. I need to make my own choices about the girls, about how we raise them. We'll make those choices together. Partners, not master and servant. I need to know that when I say no, you'll listen. That boundaries actually mean something. They will. I swear to you, they will. Victor's voice was fierce with conviction. I will fail sometimes. I will fall back on old habits and try to control things that aren't mine to control. But when I do, you'll call me on it, and I'll adjust. We'll adjust until we find a balance that works for both of us. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to think that love and good intentions were enough to transform someone so fundamentally that Victor Leone could become a true partner instead of a benevolent dictator. But she'd learned that transformation required action, not just promises. Prove it, she said quietly. Starting now. Show me that you can give me space and autonomy even when every instinct you have screams to control the situation. Victor studied her face, then nodded slowly. What do you need? I need to go back to the city tomorrow, to the apartment you set up, not back to your mansion. I need my own space while we figure this out. She watched him struggle with it, saw the immediate resistance flare in his eyes before he tamped it down. You'll have security. Agreed. But discreet security, not an armed guard in my living room. Fine. Marco will coordinate something subtle, and I need to start looking for work, real work, not jobs you create for me or positions in companies you control. That one was harder. Victor's hands tightened on hers, and Elena saw the war playing out across his features, the need to protect versus the promise to let go. You're 6 months pregnant with twins, he said carefully. Maybe we could table the employment discussion until after they're born. Maybe. But I need to know that when I'm ready, you won't try to sabotage my independence. I won't. The words came out strained, but he said them. Your independence, your choices, your autonomy, they're not negotiable. I understand that now. Elena searched his face, looking for deception or manipulation, but found only exhaustion and sincerity. Okay, she said finally. Okay, we can try this. But Victor? The moment it starts feeling like the old patterns, the moment I feel myself getting smaller to accommodate your need for control, I'm gone. For good this time. Understand? I understand. He pulled her close again, his lips finding her temple. Thank you for giving me another chance. I won't waste it. They held each other as midnight ticked toward morning, two broken people trying to build something whole from the pieces of their shattered marriage. Elena didn't know if it would work, didn't know if love was really enough to bridge the canyon between who they'd been and who they needed to become. But for the first time in 6 months, she felt something close to hope. And maybe, just maybe, hope was enough to start with. The following morning brought crystalline sunlight and the kind of cold that made breath visible in the air. Elena woke in the estate's guest room, alone but not lonely, wrapped in soft sheets that smelled faintly of lavender. For the first time in months, she'd slept deeply, her body finally releasing the tension it had carried since the moment she'd seen Victor at that crosswalk. She found him in the kitchen again, this time with coffee already brewed and breakfast laid out, overnight oats with berries, whole grain toast, a protein smoothie the color of summer grass. Dr. Chen sent recipes, he explained, looking almost sheepish. Apparently I've been neglecting optimal nutrition for twin pregnancies. You've been reading pregnancy books. I've been educating myself. There's a difference. Victor poured her orange juice, then hesitated before sitting across from her. I also called a contractor. The nursery at the Tribeca apartment needs modification, Doctor. Chen says twins require different spacing for cribs, additional storage, better ventilation. I wanted to get your approval before making changes. Elena paused with her spoon halfway to her mouth. You're asking my permission. I'm asking your input. It's your space, our daughter's space. You should have final say on how it's designed. It was such a small thing, such a basic courtesy. But coming from Victor Leone, it felt monumental. Elena set down her spoon, studied his face across the table. What changed? She asked quietly. Last night, this morning, you're different, more careful, like you're thinking twice before every word. Victor was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on his coffee cup. I almost lost you yesterday, not to Volkov directly, but to the reality of what my world costs. When I was sitting in that warehouse waiting for him to arrive, all I could think about was you alone in our apartment 6 months ago, packing a bag in the middle of the night because living with me had become unbearable. Victor, let me finish. He looked up, and Elena saw something raw in his eyes. I've spent 20 years building an empire on control. Every situation managed, every variable accounted for, every threat neutralized before it could become a problem. It made me powerful. It made me successful. But it also made me someone you couldn't breathe around, someone who loved you by suffocating you. Elena felt her throat tighten. I never said you were suffocating. You didn't have to. You left. That said everything. Victor's hand reached across the table, palm up, an offering rather than a demand. I don't know how to be someone different, Elena. Control is instinct for me. But I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to fail and try again, and keep failing until I figure out how to love you without caging you. She placed her hand in his, felt his fingers close around hers with devastating gentleness. It's going to be hard. You're going to want to make decisions for me, protect me in ways I don't want to be protected. Old patterns don't just disappear because we want them to. I know, but I have motivation now. His free hand gestured toward her belly, where the twins were beginning their morning routine of kicks and rolls. They deserve a father who knows how to respect boundaries, who understands that love doesn't mean ownership. I want to be that father. I want to be worthy of them. And what about being worthy of me? That too. Especially that. Victor's thumb traced circles against her palm. So yes, I'm asking about nursery modifications instead of just making them. I'm planning to give you space in the city instead of insisting you move back to the mansion. I'm trying to prove that I can change, even when it goes against every instinct I possess. Elena squeezed his hand, feeling something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of it. The possibility that maybe people really could transform if they wanted it badly enough. Okay, she said. Then let's talk about the nursery. What modifications were you thinking? They spent breakfast discussing cribs and changing tables and the logistics of caring for twin infants in an urban apartment. Victor pulled out his phone to show her photos from the contractor, ideas for storage solutions and lighting adjustments. He deferred to her preferences, suggested rather than decided, listened when she explained what she wanted. It felt like a partnership. It felt like what their marriage should have been all along. After breakfast, they walked the grounds together. Elena bundled in a coat Victor produced from somewhere, his hand steady at her elbow as they navigated the frost-slick paths. The estate looked different in daylight, less Gothic fortress, more sanctuary tucked into wilderness. I bought this place the year before we met, Victor said as they paused near a small pond, its surface glazed with ice. I was 34, already successful, already lonely in ways I couldn't articulate. I told myself I needed a retreat, somewhere to escape when the pressure got too intense. But really, I think I was looking for peace I didn't know how to create. Did you find it here? Sometimes. For a few hours at a time. He stared out at the frozen water, his profile sharp against the winter sky. Then I met you, and suddenly I didn't need the estate anymore. You became my peace, my escape, the one place where the weight of everything else didn't matter. Elena felt her chest constrict. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. I know, I realize that now. You couldn't be both my partner and my sanctuary. The two roles were incompatible, and I was too blind to see it. Victor turned to face her, his hands finding hers. This time, if we do this, I won't make you responsible for my peace. That's my work to do, my burden to carry. What if I want to help carry it sometimes? What if partnership means sharing the weight, not just maintaining separate spheres? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe, or hope. Then we'll figure out how to do that without you getting crushed under it. We'll communicate. We'll check in. We'll make sure the load is balanced. You make it sound simple. It's not. It's probably the hardest thing I'll ever do, but it's worth it. His hand moved to her belly, where the twins were making their presence known. They're worth it. You're worth it. They stood there in the cold, breathing frost into the air, connected by touch and possibility, and two lives growing between them. Elena felt one of the twins kick against Victor's palm, saw his expression transform with that wonder she was starting to recognize. Do they always move this much? He asked. Pretty much. The doctor says it's a good sign, means they're healthy and strong, though it makes sleeping interesting. What does it feel like? From the inside, I mean. Elena considered, trying to find words for a sensation that defied description. Like butterflies at first, when they were smaller. Now it's more like tiny acrobats practicing their routine, sometimes gentle, sometimes so strong it takes my breath away. There are moments when I can see the outline of a foot or an elbow pressing against my skin, and it's surreal, like they're trying to introduce themselves before we even meet. Victor's hand spread wider, as if he could encompass both babies at once. I can't imagine what that must be like. Growing two people inside you, feeling them move and develop, knowing they're completely dependent on you for everything. It's terrifying and amazing in equal measure. Some days I feel powerful, like my body is doing this incredible thing without me even trying. Other days I'm overwhelmed by the responsibility, by all the ways I could fail them before they're even born. You won't fail them. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because I've watched you survive impossible circumstances with grace and determination. You left me with nothing but a suitcase and built a life from scratch. You worked yourself to exhaustion to keep yourself and our daughters safe. You're the strongest person I know, Elena. Those girls are lucky to have you as their mother." Elena felt tears prickling her eyes. "I'm scared, Victor. I'm scared of labor and delivery and everything that comes after. I'm scared I won't know what to do when they cry, or won't be able to tell them apart, or will somehow damage them psychologically before they're old enough to tell me what they need. Then we'll be scared together. We'll figure it out together." Victor pulled her closer, careful of her belly. "I don't know anything about babies. I've never changed a diaper, or warmed a bottle, or soothed a crying infant. But I'll learn. We'll both learn. And when we fail, because we will fail, we'll get up and try again." "When did you become the optimistic one?" "When I realized I had something worth being optimistic about." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then her nose, then hovered near her lips. "May I?" The request was so at odds with the old Victor, the one who would have simply taken what he wanted, that Elena found herself nodding before she could overthink it. His lips met hers softly, tentatively, as if she were something precious that might shatter under too much pressure. Elena melted into it, her hands fisting in his coat, tasting coffee and promise and the ghost of who they used to be. When they pulled apart, both breathing harder, Victor's forehead rested against hers. "I've missed you," he said quietly. "Every day for 6 months. I missed you. I missed you too. Even when I was furious with you, even when leaving was the only sane choice. Part of me missed you. Does that part want to try again? Want to see if we can build something better than what we had?" Elena pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I want to. But I need you to understand. This isn't me moving back to the mansion, isn't me sliding back into the role of Mrs. Victor Leone, who smiles and complies and slowly disappears. If we do this, it's a new thing, a different thing, built on different foundations." "I understand. But do you? Because the moment you start making unilateral decisions about my life or the girls' lives, the moment you prioritize control over partnership, I'm gone. And this time, Victor, I won't come back. I can't. For my sanity, for their well-being, I can't keep cycling through this pattern." Victor's expression grew serious, the weight of her words settling over him. "I hear you. And I'm making you a promise right now. If I cross those lines, if I become that man again, you won't have to leave. I will. I'll remove myself from your life before I damage you again." "You can't mean that." "I do. Because these girls deserve stability, even if that stability doesn't include me in the daily picture. I'd rather be a father who sees them on weekends and respects their mother's boundaries than a father who's present but toxic. Can you believe that I mean it?" Elena searched his face, looking for the manipulation she'd learned to expect, the calculation behind every generous gesture. But she found only sincerity, stark and unflinching. "I want to believe it," she said honestly. "I'm just not sure I trust myself to see the truth anymore. You were so good at making control look like love. How do I know this isn't just a more sophisticated version of the same thing?" "You don't. Not yet. Trust is rebuilt through action, not promises." Victor took her hand, pressed it against his chest, where she could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. "So watch my actions, test my boundaries, push back when something feels wrong. And if I prove unworthy of your trust, leave knowing you gave me every chance." It was more honesty than Elena had expected, more vulnerability than Victor had ever shown during their marriage. She felt something crack open in her chest, felt the walls she'd built start to crumble. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we'll try." The relief that washed over Victor's face was almost painful to witness. He pulled her close again, his arms wrapping around her with a security that felt different now, like shelter rather than captivity. They stood like that until the cold drove them back inside, where warmth and coffee and the uncertain future waited. The drive back to the city that afternoon felt different from the frantic escape 2 days earlier. Elena sat beside Victor in the back of the SUV, their hands linked on the seat between them, watching the landscape shift from rural to suburban to urban. Marco drove with his usual competence, and 2 additional security vehicles flanked them, protection Victor insisted on, that Elena accepted as reasonable given recent events. "Dr. Chen wants to see you tomorrow," Victor said as they crossed into Manhattan. "She has a colleague at Metropolitan Hospital who specializes in twin deliveries. She thinks it would be good for you to meet him, start building a relationship before you go into labor. Him? Dr. James Martinez, 40 years of experience, delivered over 200 sets of twins. Dr. Chen speaks very highly of him. Elena nodded, then caught herself. Are you asking me to see him or telling me? Victor's jaw tightened, and she saw him wrestle with instinct before answering carefully. I'm suggesting it would be wise, but if you'd prefer a different doctor or want to research options yourself, that's your choice. I trust Dr. Chen's judgment. I'm fine with meeting Dr. Martinez. Elena squeezed his hand. But thank you for asking. I'm trying. I know, I can see it. They lapsed into comfortable silence as the SUV navigated city traffic. Elena watched familiar streets roll past, feeling the strange dichotomy of returning to the place she'd tried to leave while returning to a man she'd sworn to avoid. The Tribeca apartment looked exactly as she'd left it, though someone had clearly been maintaining it. Fresh flowers on the counter, the refrigerator restocked, her few belongings unpacked and arranged with care. Mrs. Rodriguez's clothes are in the nursery closet, Victor said, following her gaze. I had my housekeeper organize them by size, and I took the liberty of ordering some additional items, sleepers, blankets, basic necessities. They're still in boxes if you want to go through them. Return anything you don't like. Elena moved to the nursery, found the space transformed from the pristine showroom she'd seen days ago. Now it looked lived in, prepared, ready for actual babies. The boxes Victor mentioned were stacked neatly in one corner, and she could see receiving blankets, tiny socks, onesies, and soft neutrals. When did you have time to do all this? I made calls from the estate. Had people working while we were gone. Victor leaned against the doorframe, watching her examine the additions. I wanted you to come home to a space that felt ready. But again, everything is negotiable. If you hate it, we start over. Elena ran her hand over the soft wood of one crib, imagining a daughter sleeping there in a few months. The reality of it hit her suddenly. She was going to be a mother, to twins, in approximately 11 weeks if the pregnancy went to term. I don't hate it, she said quietly. It's perfect. Overwhelming, but perfect. That's how I feel about most things lately. Victor moved closer, his hand covering hers on the crib rail. Overwhelmed but hopeful. Terrified but determined. Lost but willing to find the way. Elena turned to face him, saw the truth of those words written in every line of his face. What happens now? We're back in the city, the threat is handled, and we have 11 weeks until these girls make their appearance. What does our life look like? I don't know. I think we figure it out day by day. Victor's free hand found her belly, that gesture becoming habitual. I'd like to be present, to come to doctor's appointments, help prepare for their arrival, be part of the process. But I don't want to intrude on your space or make you feel trapped. So maybe we establish boundaries, times when I'm welcome here, times when you need solitude? That sounds reasonable. Elena considered, then made a decision that felt both terrifying and right. What if you stayed tonight? Not in my bed, she added quickly, seeing hope flare in his eyes, but in the guest room, so we can practice this cohabitation thing in small doses. I'd like that, if you're sure. I'm not sure about anything except that our daughters are coming, whether I'm ready or not, and they deserve parents who can at least be in the same space without everything falling apart. Elena managed a small smile. Consider it a trial run. Oh, Victor's answering smile transformed his face, made him look younger, less burdened. Then I accept. On your terms, with your boundaries respected. They spent the evening in careful domesticity, cooking dinner together, arguing good-naturedly about whether garlic belonged in the pasta sauce, washing dishes side by side while the city sparkled beyond the windows. It felt normal in a way their marriage never had, because this time Elena wasn't performing the role of devoted wife. She was just herself, making space for someone else without losing her own shape in the process. After dinner, Victor made work calls in the home office while Elena sorted through the boxes of baby items. She found herself smiling at tiny sleepers decorated with clouds and stars, at blankets soft enough to cradle new skin, at the evidence of Victor's attempts to prepare for fatherhood. When she emerged from the nursery, she found him on the couch, laptop balanced on his knees. Glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed something that made him frown. "I didn't know you wore glasses," she said. Victor looked up, seemed almost embarrassed. "Reading glasses. Recent development. I'm getting old." "You're 42. That's not old." "It feels old when you're about to become a father for the first time." He closed the laptop, removed the glasses. "Are you tired? You should rest. Dr. Chen was very specific about adequate sleep." "I'm tired, but I'm not ready for bed yet. My mind is too active." Elena settled into the chair across from him. "Tell me something. Why did you really intercept Volkov's shipment? It wasn't just about the weapons or the potential attack. You've let plenty of illegal operations continue when they didn't directly threaten you." Victor was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. "Because I saw the intelligence about the school. Saw the planning, the surveillance photos, the children who would have been caught in the crossfire. And all I could think was, what if those were my children someday? What if I had daughters who went to that school, who trusted the world to keep them safe, and I'd done nothing to prevent their deaths because it wasn't my business?" "You didn't know about our daughters then?" "No. But I think some part of me was already preparing for the possibility, already imagining a future where I had something worth protecting beyond my own interests." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've spent 2 decades building power without purpose beyond acquisition. And then I met you. And suddenly there was a reason to be better, to do better, to use what I'd built for something beyond profit. I never asked you to change your business. I know, but you made me want to. You made me question whether being the most feared man in New York was really the legacy I wanted to leave. And now, with our daughters coming, I'm questioning it even more. What kind of man do I want them to see when they look at me? What stories do I want them to tell about their father?" Elena felt her throat tighten. "What answer are you coming to?" "That I need to be someone worthy of their respect. Someone who uses power responsibly, who protects the vulnerable instead of exploiting them, who builds instead of just destroying." Victor's eyes met hers, blazing with conviction. "I'm not naive enough to think I can go completely legitimate overnight. But I can shift priorities. I can refuse deals that profit from human suffering. I can use my resources to actually make the world marginally less terrible." "That's a significant change from the man I married." "The man you married didn't have daughters on the way. Didn't have you looking at him with hope that he might become someone better. That changes the equation entirely." Elena stood, moved to sit beside him on the couch. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining. "I don't need you to be a saint, Victor. I just need you to be honest, to try, to fail and admit it and try again. Can you do that? For you? For them? I can do anything." They sat together in the soft lamplight, the city humming beyond the windows, 2 broken people trying to forge something whole from the wreckage of their past. When Elena finally yawned, Victor insisted she go to bed, helped her stand with gentle hands. "Thank you for letting me stay," he said at her bedroom door. "It means more than you know. Thank you for respecting my space, for asking instead of assuming." Elena reached up, cupped his face. "We're going to figure this out, somehow." "I believe you." He turned his head, pressed a kiss to her palm. "Sleep well. Call if you need anything." Elena watched him disappear into the guest room, then closed her own door and prepared for bed. The twins were active, rolling and kicking, and she spent a few minutes talking to them quietly, her hands on her belly. "Your father is trying," she whispered. "He's really trying. I don't know if it'll be enough, but I think we owe him the chance to show us. What do you think?" The babies kicked in response, and Elena chose to interpret it as agreement. She was drifting towards sleep when the first sharp pain lanced through her abdomen. Elena gasped, her hand flying to her belly, waiting for it to pass. But instead of fading, it intensified, radiating from her pelvis up through her ribs. Something was wrong. "Victor," she called, her voice tight with fear. "Victor!" He was there in seconds, bursting through her door still dressed, his face immediately shifting to alarm when he saw her curled on her side. "What is it? What's wrong?" "Pain. Sharp pain. Something's not right." Elena tried to breathe through it, but the sensation was growing worse, accompanied now by wetness between her legs. I think something's happening." Victor moved with terrifying efficiency, his phone already in his hand. "I'm calling Dr. Chen. Stay still. Don't try to move." Elena heard him speaking rapidly into the phone, heard Dr. Chen's calm voice on speaker asking questions. "How long? How intense? Any bleeding?" "Yes," Victor said, his voice cracking slightly. "There's blood. Not a lot, but it's there. Get her to Metropolitan Hospital immediately. I'll meet you there. Don't wait for an ambulance. Just go." Victor scooped Elena into his arms before she could protest, carrying her like she weighed nothing despite her pregnant belly. Marco appeared from somewhere, already moving to open doors, clear paths, bring the SUV around. "The babies!" Elena gasped as another contraction racked her body. "Victor, it's too early. They're too small." "They're going to be fine. You're all going to be fine." His voice was steady, but she could feel the tremor in his arms, see the fear in his eyes. "Just breathe. Focus on breathing. We're almost there." The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and terror, and Victor's voice in her ear, steady and sure, promising things he couldn't possibly guarantee. Elena focused on his heartbeat, where her head pressed against his chest, focused on the twins still moving inside her, focused on anything except the possibility that she might be losing them. They burst through the emergency room doors to find Dr. Chen already waiting with a wheelchair and a team of nurses. "Get her to L&D, the doctor commanded, her calm authority cutting through the chaos. "Page Dr. Martinez and tell him we may have premature twins on the way." Elena felt herself transferred to the wheelchair, felt Victor's hand grip hers as they rushed through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and fear. "I'm right here," he said fiercely. "I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, we face it together." Elena squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the pain and terror, and prayed that together would be enough. Because ready or not, wanted or not, their daughters were demanding to be born. And nothing, not Victor's promises, not Elena's plans, not the fragile peace they'd been building, would ever be the same. The labor and delivery ward at Metropolitan Hospital hummed with controlled urgency as nurses swarmed around Elena's bed, attaching monitors and IV lines with practiced efficiency. Dr. Martinez materialized beside Dr. Chen, a silver-haired man with steady hands and eyes that had seen every complication birth could throw at him. "Talk to me, Sarah," he said, already pulling on gloves. 27 weeks, dichorionic diamniotic twins, premature rupture of membranes with moderate bleeding, contractions every 4 minutes, cervix dilated to 3 centimeters. Dr. Chen's voice was clipped, professional, stripped of the warmth Elena had come to know. This was a doctor in crisis mode, fighting to save 3 lives at once. Elena tried to focus on the words, tried to understand what they meant, but pain kept fracturing her concentration. Victor stood beside her bed, his hand crushing hers, his face drained of color. "Can you stop it?" he demanded. "The labor. Can you stop it?" "Doctor." Martinez met his eyes with the kind of honesty that came from decades of delivering both good news and devastating reality. "We can try to slow it down, give the babies more time to develop. But Mrs. Leon's water has broken, which significantly increases the risk of infection. We're walking a tightrope here. Delay too long, and we risk sepsis. Deliver now, and we're looking at extremely premature infants with underdeveloped lungs." "What are their chances?" Elena gasped between contractions. "If they're born now, what are their chances?" 70 to 80% survival rate at this gestational age, higher if we can buy even a few more hours for steroid injections to mature their lungs. But they'll need NICU care, possibly weeks or months of it, breathing assistance, feeding tubes, monitoring for complications. Dr. Martinez's hand found her shoulder, squeezed gently. "I won't lie to you. This isn't ideal. But I've delivered hundreds of premature twins, and most of them go on to live completely normal lives. Your daughters are fighters. Let's give them every advantage we can." Another contraction seized Elena, so intense she couldn't breathe through it. She heard machines beeping, heard Dr. Chen's sharp intake of breath, heard Victor's voice cracking as he said her name over and over like a prayer. "Fetal distress on baby A," a nurse announced, heart rate dropping. Dr. Martinez moved with swift precision, checking monitors, examining Elena with gentle but firm hands. When he looked up, his expression was grave. "We're out of time. Baby A is in distress. and waiting risks both infants. We need to deliver now. No, Elena sobbed. It's too soon. They're too small. They're small but strong, and every minute we delay risks their oxygen supply. Dr. Martinez's voice was kind but unyielding. Elena, I need you to trust me. We have an excellent NICU team standing by, isolates ready, every resource these babies need, but we have to get them out safely first. Can you be brave for them? Elena looked at Victor, saw terror and determination warring in his eyes. His hand tightened on hers. You can do this, he said fiercely. You're the strongest person I know. Our daughters need you to be strong right now. She wanted to argue, wanted to bargain for more time, wanted to rewind to yesterday when everything had seemed manageable. But another contraction tore through her, and she felt the urgency in her own body. Something was wrong, and her daughters needed to be born. Okay, she whispered. Okay, do it. The next hours dissolved into a blur of pain and effort, and voices urging her to push, to breathe, to rest, to push again. Victor never left her side, his hand anchoring her through waves of agony that seemed endless. She heard him whispering encouragement, felt him wipe sweat from her forehead, saw tears streaming down his face as he witnessed something he'd never imagined being part of. I can see the head, Dr. Martinez announced. One more push, Elena. Give me everything you've got. Elena bore down with strength she didn't know she possessed, felt something give way inside her, heard a sound that made her heart stop. A cry. Thin and reedy and absolutely perfect. Baby A is out, Dr. Martinez said, and suddenly there was a flurry of activity as nurses swarmed, taking the tiny form away to be assessed. Elena tried to see, tried to catch a glimpse of her daughter, but another contraction was already building. Focus on me, Victor said, his voice rough with emotion. One more, love. One more, and we get to meet both of them. Baby B came faster, as if she'd been waiting impatiently for her sister to go first. Elena felt a rush of relief as the second infant emerged, heard another cry join the first, stronger this time, more indignant. Then the world went fuzzy around the edges. She's hemorrhaging, someone said, and Elena felt hands pressing on her abdomen, felt warmth spreading beneath her, felt Victor's grip on her hand become almost painful. Stay with me, he commanded, his voice cutting through the fog. Elena, look at me. Stay with me. She tried. She really tried, but exhaustion was pulling her under, and the last thing she remembered before darkness claimed her was Victor's face above hers, transformed by fear into something raw and broken. Elena woke to the steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell of hospital. Her body felt hollowed out, emptied, as if everything essential had been removed and not quite replaced. For a moment, she couldn't remember why she was here, why her abdomen ached with surgical precision. Then memory flooded back and she gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. They're alive! Victor's voice came from beside the bed, hoarse and exhausted. Both of them. They're in the NICU, but they're alive. Elena turned her head, found him sitting in a chair pulled close to her bedside, looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. His clothes were rumpled, his hair disheveled, and his eyes were red-rimmed with sleeplessness and tears. What happened? Why don't I remember? You hemorrhaged after the second delivery. They had to take you to surgery, stop the bleeding. You've been unconscious for 6 hours. His hand found hers, gripped it like a lifeline. You scared the hell out of me, Elena. I thought I was going to lose you. The girls, she managed. Tell me about the girls. Victor's expression softened, transformed by wonder despite the exhaustion. They're tiny, so impossibly tiny. Baby A is 3 pounds, 2 ounces. Baby B is 3 pounds, 4 ounces. They're on breathing support and feeding tubes, hooked up to more machines than I can count. But they're breathing, Elena. Their hearts are beating. They're fighting. Tears streamed down Elena's face. Can I see them? Not yet. You're still recovering from surgery and the NICU has strict protocols, but Dr. Martinez took photos. Victor pulled out his phone with shaking hands, pulled up images that made Elena's breath catch. 2 impossibly small infants, each in their own isolette, connected to tubes and wires that looked obscene against their delicate skin. But their tiny faces were perfect. Miniature features that were somehow both Victor's and Elena's, blended into something entirely new. They're beautiful, Elena whispered. They're the most beautiful things I've ever seen. They have your nose, and I think baby A has my stubborn chin. Victor's thumb traced over the screen, his voice breaking. The nurses let me hold baby B for 2 minutes after you went into surgery. She fit in my hands, Elena. Her entire body fit in my hands, and she looked up at me with these ancient eyes, like she was trying to figure out who I was. And I fell apart. Stood there in the NICU holding my daughter and cried like a child because nothing in my entire life prepared me for how it would feel to love someone that much that quickly. Elena squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Victor set down the phone and moved closer, his free hand smoothing hair back from her forehead. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for the pregnancy. Sorry you had to do so much of this alone. Sorry that my world brought danger to you and our daughters. If I could go back and do everything differently, we can't go back. We can only move forward." Elena managed a weak smile. "And right now, forward means figuring out how to be parents to 2 premature infants who need us more than we've ever been needed. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a father to children this fragile, this vulnerable. Neither do I. But we'll learn. Together." Elena pulled his hand to her lips, kissed his knuckles. "What are we going to name them?" Victor's eyes widened. "You want me to help choose?" "They're your daughters too. Of course I want your input." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I've been thinking about that, actually. During the hours you were in surgery, I sat in the NICU and looked at them and tried to imagine what names would fit. Baby A, the one who came first, she's a leader. She went into the world first, showed her sister it was safe. I was thinking maybe Sophia. It means wisdom." "Sophia," Elena repeated, testing it. "Sophia Leone. I like it. And baby B, she's fierce. She came out fighting, cried louder, grabbed my finger and wouldn't let go when I held her. I thought maybe Isabella. It means devoted to something higher than yourself." Sophia and Isabella. Elena felt fresh tears sliding down her temples. "They're perfect, Victor. They're absolutely perfect." Just like their mother. They sat in silence for a while, Elena drifting in and out of consciousness, Victor maintaining his vigil beside her bed. When Dr. Chen came to check on her progress, she found them both asleep, hands still linked across the hospital blankets. "He hasn't left your side since you came out of surgery," the doctor said softly when Elena woke. "Hasn't eaten, hasn't taken calls. Marco had to physically drag him to the bathroom. I've never seen Victor Leone look vulnerable before. It's quite remarkable." "How long before I can see them? The twins?" "We'll get you in a wheelchair this evening if your vitals stay stable. The NICU allows parents unlimited access, but you'll need to be strong enough to scrub in and follow protocols." Dr. Chen checked Elena's incision, nodded with satisfaction. "You're healing well. The hemorrhage was scary, but we got it under control. You'll need to take it easy for a few weeks. No lifting anything heavier than your babies, but you should make a full recovery." "And the girls? Really, how are they doing?" Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. "They're doing as well as we can expect for 27 weekers. Both are on CPAP machines for breathing support, which is normal. They're getting nutrition through feeding tubes until they're strong enough to nurse. The next 72 hours are critical. We're watching for any complications, any signs of infection, or organ distress. But Elena, they're strong. Their APGAR scores were better than expected. Their systems are all functioning, and they're responding well to treatment." Dr. Martinez is cautiously optimistic. "What does that mean in real terms? How long will they be here?" "Probably 8 to 10 weeks minimum, possibly longer depending on their development. Premature babies need to reach certain milestones before they can go home. Breathing on their own, maintaining body temperature, feeding consistently. But many preemies go on to develop completely normally. You're giving them everything they need to thrive." After Dr. Chen left, Victor returned with coffee for himself and ice chips for Elena, who wasn't allowed food yet. He settled back into his chair, looking slightly more human after washing his face. "Marco says the press got wind of the birth," he said quietly. "Someone leaked it to page 6. We're going to need to make a statement soon. Control the narrative before it gets out of hand. Elena tensed. I don't want our daughters turned into tabloid fodder. Neither do I. But we can't prevent coverage entirely, not given who I am, who we are. What we can do is release a simple statement. Elena Leone and Victor Leone are pleased to announce the birth of their twin daughters, Sophia and Isabella. The babies were born premature and are receiving excellent care at Metropolitan Hospital's NICU. The family requests privacy during this time. You said Elena Leone, not Elena Ward. Victor met her eyes. You're the mother of my children. That makes you family, whether we're married or not, unless you object to using the name. Elena considered, then shook her head slowly. I don't object. For them, I'll be Elena Leone again. It'll make things simpler legally, medically. But Victor, that doesn't mean... I know, it doesn't mean we're back together. Doesn't mean you're agreeing to anything beyond co-parenting. I understand. His hand found hers again. But Elena, I want you to know that I'm going to fight for us. I'm going to prove every day that I can be the partner you need, the father our daughters deserve. I'm going to earn back your trust, even if it takes years. Because this, he gestured between them toward the NICU where their daughters fought for every breath. This is worth fighting for. One day at a time, Elena said softly. Let's just take it one day at a time. That evening, Dr. Chen wheeled Elena down to the NICU, Victor walking beside them with his hand on her shoulder. The unit was hushed, filled with the gentle hum of machines and the quiet movements of nurses tending their tiny charges. When they reached the isolates containing Sophia and Isabella, Elena's breath caught all over again. They were so small, so impossibly fragile. Tubes ran from their noses, monitors were taped to their bird-like chests, IV lines disappeared into their translucent skin. But they were alive, their tiny chests rising and falling with mechanical assistance, their miniature hands curled into fists no bigger than walnuts. You can touch them through the ports, a nurse explained gently. They respond well to parental contact. It's called kangaroo care. Skin-to-skin contact helps regulate their temperature and heartbeat, promotes bonding. Elena slipped her hands through the openings in Sophia's isolette, her fingers finding impossibly soft skin. The baby's eyes were closed, her features relaxed in sleep, despite all the medical intervention surrounding her. Hi, baby girl, Elena whispered. Hi, Sophia. It's Mama. You did so good, sweetheart. You're so strong. Sophia's tiny hand moved, fingers flexing as if reaching for something. Elena offered her pinky finger, felt those miniature digits close around it with surprising strength. She knows you, Victor said, his voice thick with emotion. He had his hands in Isabella's isolette, his expression one of complete wonder. Isabella opened her eyes when I touched her. Just for a second, but she looked right at me. They stayed there for an hour, talking softly to their daughters, marveling at every tiny movement, every fluctuation on the monitors. The NICU nurses moved around them with practiced discretion, adjusting machines, checking vitals, offering quiet encouragement. They're fighters, one nurse said, a woman named Patricia who'd been caring for premature infants for 25 years. I can always tell which babies have that extra spark, that determination to live. Your girls have it. They're going to do just fine. Over the following days, Elena and Victor fell into a rhythm dictated by hospital visiting hours and their daughter's needs. Elena recovered from surgery in a private room that Victor had arranged, her incision healing cleanly despite the trauma. Victor slept in a chair beside her bed, refusing to leave even when she insisted he go home for proper rest. I'm not missing a moment, he said stubbornly. Not one single moment of this. They spent hours in the NICU, learning to change tiny diapers and take temperatures and speak the language of monitors and medication schedules. They watched nurses demonstrate how to hold the girls for skin-to-skin contact, how to position feeding tubes, how to recognize signs of distress. Sophia, the smaller twin, proved to be a quiet fighter. She slept peacefully between breathing treatments, her tiny face serene, her progress steady if slow. Isabella, true to her name's meaning, was devoted to making her presence known. She pulled at her tubes, fussed during diaper changes, opened her eyes with increasing frequency to stare at her parents with ancient wisdom. She's going to be trouble, Victor said fondly, his fingers stroking Isabella's impossibly small hand. She's going to be the one questioning every rule, pushing every boundary. And Sofia will be the one carefully considering all angles before making her move, Elena added, watching her quieter daughter sleep. They're going to balance each other perfectly. On the 5th day, Dr. Martinez pulled them aside for an update. The girls are doing remarkably well. Both are off CPAP and breathing on their own with minimal oxygen support. They're tolerating small amounts of breast milk through their feeding tubes. If this progress continues, we might be looking at discharge in 6 to 8 weeks instead of 10. They're really going to be okay? Elena asked, hardly daring to believe it. Barring any unexpected complications, yes. They're defying the odds, these two. Strong genes. Dr. Martinez smiled at Victor. Must run in the family. That night, Elena was finally cleared to be discharged. Victor had arranged for them to stay in a suite at a hotel across from the hospital, close enough to respond immediately if needed, but comfortable enough to actually rest. The suite was beautiful, a full kitchen, separate bedroom, and sitting area with windows overlooking the city. But what made Elena's throat tighten was the nursery Victor had set up in one corner. 2 bassinets waited empty, dressed in soft linens, ready for the day their daughters could come home. I know it's premature, Victor said, following her gaze. They might not be discharged for weeks, but I wanted to have it ready. Wanted to have something to visualize while we wait. Elena moved to the bassinets, running her hand over the smooth wood. It's perfect. They're perfect. This whole impossible situation is somehow perfect. Victor came up behind her, his hand settling on her shoulders. I want to make this permanent, Elena. Not just the co-parenting, not just the careful peace we've been building. I want us. I want to be a family. You, me, Sofia, Isabella. I want to wake up every morning knowing we're facing the world together. Elena turned to face him, saw vulnerability and hope warring in his expression. Victor, I know I don't deserve it. I know I damaged your trust in ways that might be irreparable. But watching you give birth to our daughters, watching you fight through surgery and recovery, seeing you become a mother right before my eyes, it's made me understand what I was too blind to see before. You're not someone to be controlled or protected or managed. You're my equal, my partner. The other half of something I didn't know was incomplete until I met you. People don't change overnight, Elena said softly. And you've spent 42 years being a certain kind of man. I can't just trust that 6 days in a NICU has transformed you completely. I'm not asking you to trust me completely. I'm asking you to let me earn it back. Let me prove every day through action, not words, that I've learned, that I'm learning, that I'm willing to fail and get up and try again until I become the man you and our daughters deserve. Victor took her hands, held them between his own. Move in with me. Not to the mansion. I'll sell it if you want. We'll buy something together, something we choose as partners. We'll raise Sofia and Isabella as a team, make every decision together, build a life that has room for both of us without either of us disappearing into the other. Elena looked into his eyes and saw sincerity there, but also the awareness of his own limitations. He wasn't promising perfection. He was promising effort. Maybe that was enough. Okay, she whispered. Okay. But Victor, the moment it starts feeling like before, the moment control becomes more important than partnership. You tell me. You call me on it. And I adjust. We adjust. He pulled her close, careful of her healing incision. I'm going to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you. That's a promise I will never break. They stood together in the quiet suite, holding each other, imagining the future that waited across the street in 2 tiny isolettes. It wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks and challenges and moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves. But for the first time since that rain-soaked crosswalk, Elena felt something like certainty. They could do this. They could be partners and parents, and possibly, eventually, even lovers again. One day at a time. One choice at a time. One breath at a time, just like their daughters were learning to do. 6 weeks later, on a bright December morning, Dr. Martinez signed discharge papers for both Sofia and Isabella Leon. They'd grown. Sofia now weighed 5 pounds even. Isabella, a robust 5 pounds, 6 ounces. They breathed on their own, fed from bottles with increasing efficiency, and had passed every test the NICU required. Elena stood in the discharge room, Sophia in her arms, watching Victor cradle Isabella with the confidence of someone who'd learned everything there was to know about caring for premature infants. He'd been there every day, every feeding, every diaper change, every moment of fear when monitors beeped or breathing became labored. He'd proven himself in action, not just words. "Ready to take our girls home?" he asked, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "More ready than I've ever been for anything." Elena looked down at Sophia's sleeping face, at the daughter who'd fought so hard to be here. "Let's go be a family." The apartment they'd chosen together waited in Brooklyn, close to Prospect Park, with enough space for the girls to grow without the ostentation of Victor's mansion. It had a real nursery, painted soft green with 2 cribs side by side, a rocking chair positioned to catch morning light. Marco helped carry car seats and diaper bags, his normally stern face transformed by the kind of smile reserved for babies who'd survived impossible odds. Patricia, their favorite NICU nurse, had sent them home with detailed care instructions and her personal phone number for emergencies. As they drove through the city, Elena looked at Victor in the front seat, then at her sleeping daughters in their car seats beside her. 6 months ago, she'd been running from this man, convinced that loving him meant losing herself. Now she was choosing him every day, choosing partnership over isolation, choosing to believe that people could transform if they wanted it badly enough. "What are you thinking?" Victor asked, catching her eye in the rearview mirror. "That we did the impossible. We created something beautiful from something broken. We're going to be okay, aren't we?" "Better than okay." His hand reached back, found hers. "We're going to be extraordinary. Because we have you and Sophia and Isabella. Because we chose each other even when it was hard. Because love, real love, isn't about control or possession. It's about growth and choice and showing up every day ready to do the work." Elena squeezed his hand, felt the truth of it settle into her bones. They were going to be okay. Better than okay. They were going to be a family, forged through fear and separation, and 2 tiny lives that demanded they become better than they'd ever been. And when they carried their daughters through the threshold of their new home, when they laid Sophia and Isabella in their cribs and stood together watching them sleep, Elena knew with absolute certainty that this messy, complicated, hard-won love was worth every moment of struggle. "Welcome home, girls," Victor whispered, his arm around Elena's waist. "Welcome to the beginning of everything." And as their daughters dreamed, 2 lives that had begun at a crosswalk in the rain settled into the future they'd fought so hard to build, together, choosing each other with every breath. Finally, completely home.